What does it feel like to be you? I was at an Ajahn retreat, I can't remember if it was the same one, but he told the story of the Buddhists they listened to a man called Ramana Maharshi, who'd written the book, Who Am I? So the Buddhists got together and organised a retreat, and the idea was that they sat opposite one another for 6 hours, and every 5 minutes they said, but who are you? And then the other one would say, but who are you? And they'd done that for hours and hours, for 2 days. And finally one of the guys got up and walked out. He said, a complete waste of time. Got in his car and he drove away, but he didn't realise he was speeding. The police car came up behind. The police stopped him. The policeman says, just who do you think you are? And that evoked his experience. He says, oh, you're great, but there was still the £200 fine, But I was to show there's something important about focusing on identity, but there's ways of going about it. And most people like myself, quite common, when you read Ramana Maharshi, his focus is not how do I solve this problem, his focus is on who has the problem? Who's this entity that has the problem? And most of the teachers we've mentioned today, at some point, they will focus on identity. I mean, Krishnamurti wrote a whole book without using the word I. So obviously identity is important. So I'm going to read a little thing and then just go around the group. Doesn't matter where it comes from. What does it feel like to be you? What is that identity of you? What does it feel like without any memory of the past? Because right now you are in the present moment in the Arthur Conan Doyle Centre. Where is your innermost identity? The you, that sense of I, that sense of being. And the strange thing is, you can get a sense of identity without reference to memory. You're not more fully yourself when you remember all your past. And when you are in this moment, when you're simply aware of being. Being is the core of your identity. This awareness gets mixed up with thoughts and emotions. Then the thoughts and emotions become imbued with a sense of self. The authentic self comes from the formless realm within. So it's a starting point to exploring the benefits of putting our focus into identity. Most of the teachings we've brought up today, whether it's Ajahn Eckhart, Krishnamurti, at some point, if you've been reading these teachings for many, many years, the suggestion here is put your focus into what are they saying about identity. You can go on YouTube and get 50 videos of Eckhart speaking identity. You'll get it with Ajahn. The book called The Direct Way by Ajahn, the focus on identity. So, I have a book here called Deep Self-Investigation. I've had quite an inner impact from the book. I read the book 6 times, non-stop. And every day since I've had the book, I've been reading it 2 or 3 times a day, because the inner teacher is, the important teacher is a teacher within. There's been a response to the book from the inside. So I'd like to hear some of your thoughts about the importance of an investigation into the identity. Who is this thought created self? Who is this person in the mind that we identify with? Maybe I'll read another bit. I've tried my best to condense this book into half a page.
Yes, Steve.
Just a second. I've done my best to condense the book into half a page. Have a wee listen first. The book is about questioning the reality of the separate self in 2 simple steps. First, the question is as a pointer. Who is this I that feels disturbed, as an example? The question directs the attention. We then shift focus to direct perception, which is not so easy because most of us go to the mind for the answer immediately. Even in listening to what I'm saying, you probably went to the mind. So in this case, the mind is sitting back at that point in a lower role. It's now acting as a servant of awareness, not as the monkey mind that you must stop or suppress or hold down. So we're asking, who is this person in the mind? We're focusing on the I, not telling the young person, watch your thoughts, because I dare you later, it's too big an enterprise to watch all your thoughts. But if you tell them to watch the I thoughts, we're exploring the present perception of ourself. Who is watching? Who is this self and perception? Who is this I? All of this could be called awakening from the dream of me. Just throwing out statements, keep in sequence around the circle. Try not to point out people by name. See if you can go around the circle. Identity, what is it? Investigation into identity. Not everybody is ready to do this. This is not a book for everybody. But I've had more depth from reading that book than any other book I've read, including Krishnamurti or Eckhart Tolle. And I had to read that first before going to that book. And the author's called Dan Kelso. It's on YouTube. You can see if it resonates for you or not. He holds small groups. I've been in contact with him by email. He doesn't do Skype sessions. It has to be a live interaction. And he only operates with small. He doesn't know how to communicate to 5,000 people. So the focus for the remaining hour or so, identity. What do you feel about this? Who am I? David, who organises sharing circles, who is this guy? Who is this I who's a meditation teacher? The guitar player, all that stuff. Who's the young woman who comes from France? Identity.
That is the big question, I think. Identity. Who am I? I personally was not aware of that question when that question came to me in a moment of crisis in my life. And it struck me, and I was left with that question for a while until I understood that was the biggest question we can ask ourselves. And ultimately, there's no word. It's something you find within yourself. It's something in this physical world, you still need to have some pieces of to describe your name and in a sense even the rules that you have in life. But this identity within yourself is so much wider, bigger than any of this. And it's the living of it in the day-to-day life. It's I think it connects back to that idea of meditation earlier. Meditation is a state of being. It's a way of being. It's resting into this I am. There's nothing more. I don't know. it's this. There's nothing more to say, but I am. There's no other words to say that. In my personal experience, it's I'll stop here.
Yes, it's I am. I used to use something from the psychosynthesis tradition. It comes from, I think, from Ramana Maharshi. It was a sort of meditation where you actually discounted all the different hats you had. And you would go through first and you would say, I have a body, but I am not my body. I keep it healthy, I look after it, etc. I have a body, but I'm not my body. And then you go deeper down and you say, I have my emotions, but I am not my emotions. So you gradually pare everything away. Then I have my thoughts, but I am not my thoughts. Until you've actually got rid of everything, and you just come to nothing at the bottom, and where there was just that pure sense of pure awareness, which you can't really talk about because you would have to talk about in the duality, and you can't because it's not in the duality. So there's no word for it. It just is a very, yes. And the other thing is that I think often we get to the stage where we're able to sit in the place of being the witness of these things. But then, who are we when we're not the witness? It's being able to let the witness go, so there's no witness. And then I think you just come to the thing. You come to mergence. I suppose mergence, really, with everything that is, and you realise everything's the same, really. All energy, all awareness, stillness.
And who is this I is asking the question? Then that suggests duality. Why would you be asking yourself the question of who you are? That doesn't make sense to me. You are one. And you say, I am. Not two. Simple for me. Just one.
We have to have the contrast of this becoming aware of something more than just this me. Otherwise, well, we have to start there. There has to be a contrast, you know? And when this awareness state deepens, then we become more curious and we start to ask questions. Who is this that asks, who am I? Or who am I? Here, who is this? But it's not to dismiss one and accept the other. I mean, even the very fact that we ask, who am I, could be a thought. You have to be very, very careful. It's very subtle. So, in the state of awareness, who am I? Then there's nothing. There's nothing. Because you have to just be there. And it comes to you. It's not trying to find anything. It reveals to you, this that you are reveals to you. So then even the question of who am I disappears. Because I am this. And then there's no words. There's no words to describe that. I think when we're looking on our spiritual journey as to this person who has this identity, these stories, then when we become so curious and so earnest in finding, because we understand, I know that I am not this. I know deeply that I am not this, but it's there and it persists. And my attention goes there. And I'm here and then I'm there in this me. And I think to understand, we have to understand that pull, the mechanism of thought, as Krishnamurti describes this mechanism that takes us away from the ability to be with what is. And that's what it is. Our inability to stay with what is, because our mind is so, and our thoughts and our emotions and our doing is so strong that our attention whips back. And just to see that, my attention has gone. And whose attention? Is it even whose attention? We have to be very open to go deeper and deeper, because it's so subtle that it's not just the mind that's trying to find something. And then, so it becomes very, very quiet. And there are no questions and there are no answers, really. It's a state of being. But we have to be vigilant. If we choose to be, we don't have to be, I'm not. But if we choose to be, and we're curious to know the depths of this, that understands this, that sees this awareness state, then we have to be aware of our attention, our connection to our stories when it happens. But not to push away or to try and be one and not the other. It's not a fight. It's an understanding, an unfolding, and a deep understanding of, at this moment, I'm all of this.
I was conscious of pondering the conundrum of who is someone, especially when you come across spiritual teachers or you hear about Jesus, you hear about Buddha. I mentioned Krishnamurti there. The first time I came across Krishnamurti, it was in a book written by an ex-CIA member who met him in a plane and he hadn't a clue who he was. But the plane stopped somewhere and they got off and had to have the second to speak to him. And Krishnamurti, he said, after they spoke, he said, "Do you mind if I sit next to you?" He says, well, he said something about what he noticed about who he was sitting next to, and a few other things he noticed, Krishnamurti noticed. And he just became very aware that he was a very aware person. And he asked him at one point, "So what do you do?" And he said, "I'm a sort of philosopher." And that's the only time I've ever heard Krishnamurti say, as in, to help someone understand this person sitting next to them. So it's a sort of lover of truth. I just thought that was it. And I realised when people were talking that part of the conundrum for me reading Krishnamurti and his work was the person, the personality, because there was a biography. We've all got a biography. His was 2 volumes, so I read it all, and there's all these events, all the events in our own lives, all the difficulties, disappointments, conflicts, interpersonal problems. And yet, throughout that, and get to know his teaching and the commonality of that teaching with a universal teaching. So who is he? Who are we? And I suppose I get a sense of we have a conditioning that acts, and we can be aware of it. But there's an intelligence that isn't personal, that that can observe the universe and whatever this entity, this body is, that isn't necessarily personal, but it's not impersonal. So that's the mystery and the conundrum that I tend to ponder at times. And identity can be imprisoning, and no one wants to be in a prison. But also, I think we're all saying that we've had experience of some sort of sense of freedom. So it's where I am with thinking about identity.
For a long time, I put off the practice of spiritual self-inquiry. It just did not speak to me. I was kind of closed to it. When I did finally approach it, was more of kind of, I am not my body, I am not my mind, I am not my story, you know, some of the things you're not, rather than what things are. But I've come to understand, and occasionally glimpse, that I am energy, I am consciousness, I am awareness. And as somebody said recently, I am you and you are me. And when that awakening occurs, like everything is alive, the floor is alive, and the mic is alive, the bottle is alive, I am alive. It just all merges together. And we are just part of this huge universe, you know, like where all that came from, I have no idea. But there's, as you get into that exploration, and so that you can get lost in that. And, you know, there are people who think, well, I'm not my body, I'm not my mind, you know, like, so I don't need to go to work, I don't need to do this because, you know, well, nothing really matters. It's all, you know, it's just a dream. But as I heard Eckhart Tolle at the gas pump say, well, try walking in front of a bus and see how much a dream it is. So there's the kind of spiritual exploration, the delving into the consciousness and energy and awareness, but also playing with who we are, because we are here in physical form to experience, you know, seeing and being and touch and laughter and all the things we get to experience in this human incarnation. So who am I? I'm universal consciousness, I'm awareness, I am light and love, but I'm also a human with a story and with, you know, wants, desires, and, you know, so this is the duality. And that's what makes it fun.
Probably the majority of people, particularly speak about Scotland, the majority of people in Scotland probably don't meditate and don't ask the question, who am I? I mean, the beginning of the book, The Power Now, the first paragraph, as it were, is he's at the point of suicide, and he says, who is this I that cannot live with itself? There seems to be a duality there. And I can, don't take this personally, you can hear how the mind will throw up a description of what it's like to be living in a different identity while it's still anchored in that identity. So The two steps there are quite rare for us to be able to tackle. You ask the question, then you go to perception. That perception, we don't go to what Krishnamurti said, or what Eckhart said, or what David said. You sense the energy in the body, the nervousness in the body. The body's nervous of the question. You can sense that in the body. Don't go there. You know? Because that's a threat to the conditioned entity. If you get to the point of seeing that there is a thought created sense of self, this is going to dissolve if you can bring in the perception. And we've got such a strong habit of going to the mind. That's unlikely to happen unless you've got a teacher or you've got a few friends and you focus directly on that. You may change. Then, if it's authentic, the question, there will be, the words I'm going to use, shock. You will be in for shock because that which you've been describing is beyond mental descriptions. You now operate in a different way. You're no longer defending the me. You have more affection for the people who are in front of you. You sense the oneness, the bird that hits the window, the conversation that's challenging. There's no threat. There's no duality of me and them. Maybe for 2 minutes. And you're more awake to nature, the colours and the trees. Something's coming up. It's not just a verbal description of, there's a oneness and you can't see anything about the oneness, blah, 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 blah. We've all heard that 1,000 times. So that there's something real. The man who wrote the book, I was in contact with him. I said to him, it was a shock to read your book. He says, great, I'm glad you were shocked, David. But he doesn't do one till he's in North Carolina in the mountains somewhere. And he's been reading Ramana Maharshi. And he says, great, you can see how there's some great pointers there, but how do you go about this? You have to find a way that would work he's not saying this is going to work for everybody. But most of us, when we go to dialogue, we very much go into the mind, we go into analysis, we go into opinions. We don't normally go into the perception that sees the caterpillar. The statement from Christianity that I haven't heard any minister speak on, deny thyself. That's in the Christian teaching. What does it mean, deny thyself? If it was a true self, you wouldn't deny. So there's a negation, but not just a clever mental negation. I'll go onto YouTube, I'll see 40 or more, particularly young guys, under the heading of non-duality. They have all the answers to the question what I've brought today. But I wonder how many of them have actually had any experience. Possibly none. They've got a watertight philosophy, and wherever they'll tie up in that mental philosophy and go around in a circle. And that's where they are at the moment. So there's a shift. I'll give you another example of the shift. I'm in a little shop, my daughter knows Opal Moon. Strange, after reading the book. So I go into a shop, there's a woman standing in front, she's talking to the assistant. And I could feel the energy coming off her body. And I think, this is like my friend Elizabeth. I don't know why, because I've no idea what Elizabeth's energy is like, but that's the sentence of. And the woman spun round on her heels and says, what are you thinking? And I says, I'm wondering if I've got enough money. And she knew I was making it up, And when she went out of that shop, she turned around and stared at me. We both could feel it. It's just not appropriate in a shop with a stranger to say, I'm sensing your energy. And it feels just like my friend, blah, blah, blah. I thought afterwards, my friend, Isabel, she's an artist. And this woman was talking about Moroccan pottery. So there might be a connection there in some way. But your senses are heightened from the investigation, not just the mind throwing up a quick explanation, blah, 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 blah. It's all about this and the true self and the false self and gobbledygook, Something is happening or it's not happening. And it's not something we can push people into. You do have to be ready for that question. I think, Jemima, if you're up in Stornoway in the north of Scotland, people don't define themselves by their occupation. They don't say, I'm a doctor, I'm a nurse. It's more like I'm involved in doctorship, or it's more like hippie language. We should say, I'm into guitar playing, you know. But we don't, most people, if you say, who am I, they'll say, it's me, Alvin. I'm the postman, I'm the gas man, I'm the guitar player, you know, whatever it is, you know. So it's very important for people who've been reading literature for years and years to get to the importance of this question of identity, to come to that question when they're ready. So, yeah. I like that statement, we can sense for identity without memory. And I love Nisargadatta's statement, if you can hear it really deep, you know, I see memory, but I have no memory. That's the same for all of us. When we're operating in what we call a different way, because 99% of the time I'm not operating like that. But when we're operating, when we're awake, when there is only the present moment, and there is no future or past, then we know that we have no memory, we're not a time-bound entity. But to undo that illusion of being a time-bound entity, an action is required. And one of the actions is an investigation or meditation, or both. I would suggest both. Anybody like to go around again on that one? Anything?
I think it's not always like a sudden, what would be called a sudden awakening. You know, you have the answer to it. It might be an unfolding throughout the journey of life, and it's noticing how the world has changed. Sometimes you need to see, I mean, when I say the world has changed, your perception of the world has changed. If you start reflecting back, you know, how it was for you 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even a year ago or 6 months ago, how this unfolding is operating within oneself. It is a big question, and a few people got to experience it, to have that sudden awakening, like Ramana Maharshi, like Eckhart Tolle. But this is the beauty of life as well, to have that unfolding throughout, you know, the life experiences, and how life is offering you, you know, to explore this from this aspect. And with a friend recently, he was saying that it's a bit like a diamond, you know, consciousness is a bit like a diamond, and we're all sitting around it and we're seeing it from an angle. So we have that experience with it from that specific angle. And we all have, so we might all have, you know, different ways of how it's been unfolding within ourselves through time, because we've been able to only see that specific angle and not necessarily all of it. And I find that quite beautiful, and it's quite humbling as well. Like this.
Well, we live in a dualistic world, and in order to live in the dualistic world, we have to acknowledge our dualism, really. We can't actually live here without living in that state. But for me, it's when one gets lost and one thinks that is the only state, and yet through the meditation and the inquiry into oneself, one realizes that the biggest thing in the way usually is the ego, and to actually be able, and to be able to touch, because I don't think you can live, at least maybe the most very enlightened people can, but I don't know. Experientially, I can touch places, but I have to come back. And I couldn't live my life from being in the one, because I wouldn't pay the gas bill. I would have to, you have to be able to have both, but to know that the ground in which the duality is happening is this huge spaciousness, awareness, whatever you like to call it. So it's just like a game, a bit like a game. And I always remember that Ram Dass used to say it's like playing Monopoly. Someone will be the iron, someone will be the top hat, someone will be the boat. And I go to jail, you buy Park Lane, you put a hotel on somewhere else. And it's all fine until you believe you really are the iron or the top hat, and then the problems start. So it's being able to see it as really as something that not exactly playing the game, but in some levels you are. But of course, because the only way we, and because language is formed in the duality, we can't possibly explain something that is out with the duality in language itself, because there aren't the words to do it. So the words are only ever going to be a pointer to the way. And of course, the value of, I think, of many spiritual gatherings is not in the words, but it's in the energy of coming together and the presence, really, but not in what to actually learn or try to do or try to operate. Although if we didn't have those words and those thoughts, we probably couldn't get together. So it seems like the two things are needed. And then was so long.
Can you repeat the question?
I would phrase the question, who is this I rather than who am I? That kind of personal thinking. Who is this I?
One of 8.5 billion. We're all the I. One I. That's who we are. If you think differently, you create the division and the mess that we're in this world today. One I. 8.5 billion people.
I think when we move, when we become aware of just residing with what is and being comfortable with what is, or not, and we move from what is because of a desire to become, as in spirituality, or being more spiritual. We kind of move from just being with, and this, there's myself, there's my thoughts here, and I'm aware of all of it, and just be still there. And don't, it's like when we become wanting something, we want to become more spiritual, or we want to become more awake, or we want to become enlightened, or whatever, then our relationship with just what is becomes a fight. And so we fight with all of which, the wholeness of who we are. We fight because we cannot just be with what is. Our relationship, in my experience, in this growing awareness state, my relationship with this me has changed. I allow it to be here, but my attention is not for there. My attention is for here, to look at this, whatever is here. There's no fight with it. And in that change in your relationship, I have found that when I look, this me with all of this me stuff is further in the distance, and the space of awareness has expanded, allowing me to be able to be here allowing my me-ness to kind of be here, but almost melt. It doesn't have the same pull. My attention for it is not as it was. And I do nothing. You see, I do nothing but just be with the wholeness of everything, with the thoughts that arise. It's there, but my attention is here. This awareness is here. And everything is fine. There's no desire to become any more than what's here. It's just here. This is what's here. There's no desire to become more enlightened or more. What even is to become enlightened? What is that? It's like what's been said before. It's the beauty of life. To be able just to be in every moment this unfolding, this life, and to live fully in this life from a space of not being caught up or pulled into the stories. And it's not something you can confirm by words or by thoughts or by knowledge or by saying things over, repeating things. It's experiential. It's a direct experience. And it's just and there's no words. So it's not to become anything different from what's here now. Everything is the way that it is here. And our desire to change what is when we get into problems. To try and make something different. Because it doesn't suit or whatever the story. And it really is just about fear. Can I just be here? Can I just be here? And it doesn't mean to say that you don't pay your gas bill or you do all of that. Because it needs to be done. It arises and it needs to be done, and you're not half asleep. You're very alert in this other intelligence, which isn't just a state of awareness, it's a state of aliveness. That you just do things that need to be done. That's my experience. And as you say, it's a diamond, and we're all looking at different facets. And so I thought I would share my experience.
Just keep thinking. Identity and iPhone. It's a kind of buzz phrase, isn't it? Why do I say that? Identity, when I explore it for myself, or maybe comment on Facebook or something, but some issue to do with that. I'm struck by the dilemma between science and spirituality, where one apparent side tries to communicate with the other, and quite often on the science side there's absolutely no comprehension of what someone's talking about in the spiritual side, so-called spiritual side, or awareness or consciousness. And if anything's said to someone who has a materialist view of all that is, i.e. somehow dead, unconscious matter became conscious awareness. Science has nothing particularly to say about that. It's not within the agreement they would say to that's philosophy. So how in a society do we communicate about that? Because science does not accept that there are beings, you and I, who don't feel there's a difference between themselves and the universe. A definition of a mystic may be someone who experiences the universe as self, but not conceptually, but actually. And there's a problem there because that means nothing to a huge section of society. For myself, contemplating identity, it's a gradation between, as I was saying, about the point of view, body-centred consciousness, and the absolute certainty that there's a universe that is wider and vaster, that can't not have these qualities of life and consciousness. And that's the dilemma that we seem to be in society just now. One half of society doesn't accept as a reality to what the other half of society believes or experiences. And going back to what someone was saying about I am that, and holding that statement in consciousness and awareness. It's kind of where I am with identity. The universe, what's its identity? All that is, was and will be. It's pretty big.
I'm thinking sometimes after Shanti, instead of saying, who am I, as what am I? And sometimes that's a different way of exploring the same question. What am I? And it's kind of seeing what comes up. I mean, for me, the first thing that came up when I said, what am I? It's like stardust. But, all these things will come up, and then when there's nothing else, there is the feeling of oneness, the feeling of, I always want to say surrendering, but it's not really an act of surrendering, it's just there's nothing else to explore, it's just like you're here. And I like the idea of the aliveness of this energy. There's no grasping, because if you're grasping for something, then, you're in a different energy, like everything is just let go, and what is. And there can be many depths to this. It's a good question. And I think one that spiritual teachers spend many years sitting with, see what comes up. So I don't want the answer to life, the universe and everything. It's just sitting with the question.
I think we'll have to finish up soon. I like the Buddhist statement, no self, no problems. Where the fictitious sense of self, the thought-created sense of self, unconsciously humanity is keeping that alive. We have a lot of descriptions and a lot of reasons why we've got to stay as we are. Palestinian, Jew, we don't see we're creating the conflict. Yeah, I like the statement from the Sagadatta. He says to the man, yes, but in my world, and the man says to him, we're in the same world. He says, no, in my world there's no conflicts. So we're unconsciously perpetuating this stock-created sense of self, not just in Gaza or Israel, but in Edinburgh as well. And I think it's important that we go beyond descriptions. We get very satisfied with our descriptions of the higher states, which are still speculations from a lower state, most of the time. And there is a challenge with language. I know with the Krishnamurti's notebook, you couldn't really operate in the workplace without bringing in the word I. You run into trouble quite quick, you know. But you could certainly operate living from a state of mind free of conflict, with more energy than the state of mind that we tend to be established in. And just humour is important. When you read particularly books by Krishnamurti, you might not see the humour. When you hear the live talk, there's a bit of fun. And if there's a spiritual teacher that doesn't have a bit of fun, beware. I think we'll have to finish it today. Thank you everybody for coming along and contributing.
Thank you.